ladies, for singing that this morning. You are our special singers this year. So thank you, Miss Audra, for cooking this morning, and all the other ladies that helped serve breakfast this morning. I'm sure it was great. I didn't get to enjoy that, but all I need is coffee. Can you ladies put the pictures of the children up again? So for those of you who weren't here last night, these are, I want to recognize the Hope Allen Center for Exceptional Children again and thank them for helping out our ladies conference by wrapping our silverware. I just feel like that's just such a precious thing that they did, and our little buddy Nahum Meister, Sunshine's son, was in that group, and he was the first picture you saw on that screen, and so that was just a special blessing for us this year. Today's schedule is Miss Tracy Craig. She goes to church here at New Beginning, and Miss Christy Glenn. She is from Crawfordsville, Indiana. But before they get started, I want to remind you of, if you weren't here last night, I want you to look in your bag and look at what's in there. And so I was telling the ladies last night about your tiara and about your sand. And sometimes it's a good refresher. What is it? You need to hear something 3 times before you really remember it. So repeat for the ones that were here last night. But the reason I felt like it was important for you to have a tiara, and I was not the frilly child that my parents had. I had 2 twin sisters that were that. They were the pretty ones, the pageant kind of girls. So I was never that girl. And so I looked at this and thought, we don't think of ourselves as princesses. Some of us don't. And I think it's important for you to understand that if you're a daughter of the King, you are a princess. And so I wanted you to have this so you could put it on as a symbol of what your role really is in the Lord's work. I wanted to remind you that last night I was telling you the only way you can be a princess is if you were born with royal blood. And if you're a daughter of the King of Kings, you were born with royal blood when you were born again. That really just helped me that Google even understood that royal blood was needed. Webster defines a princess as a female member of the royal family. So if you are, in modern day, we think of Princess Diana, but she has nothing on you. You're a daughter of the King of Kings. And so just remember that. And then I want you to look at your jar of sand. Some of you just went to a wedding in Florida, and I don't know how close to the beach you were, but if you were able to see the beach and see the sand. Is anyone in here never been to the beach? You've never been? Wow. All right. Well, when you get to go, you will see a lot of this and a lot of a quantity that you can't comprehend. And so in our Bible verse, we've got to remember that, and the picture on the screen is where I went to the beach last week, and just putting your hand in the sand and picking it up and letting it run through your fingers, and you're thinking about the Lord thinks about you. Almighty God thinks about you more than those grains of sand. You can't even count them. You can't count what's in this at all. And I've tried. I tried to. Maybe it's because I'm old and my eyes can't focus on that little teeny tiny molecule, but scientists are even saying now that sand is immeasurable, and immeasurable is defined as limitless. So that means God's thoughts toward you are limitless. And can you imagine that? I just can't even, I'm still trying to process that. Monica Cook and I were talking yesterday after the service about just trying to think about that. Just, you are a daughter of the King, and he thinks about you that much. He owns everything. So you can go to your Father, the King, for any need you have. There's nothing too hard for him. Nothing he can't do for you, whether it's physical, spiritual, or emotional. He can do it all. So remember that. His thoughts towards you are limitless. And as I prayed about who the Lord would have speak this year, the Lord laid Miss Tracy on my heart. And you can read her bio in the schedule. And I'll tell you one of her fun facts is she likes to dance in the rain. She said nobody knows that about her. But on a serious note, I knew Tracy, that the Lord wanted Tracy to speak several months ago when he put it so heavy on my heart. I cannot even explain to you the heaviness to go pray with her at the hospital. And it was my granddaughter's birthday party, and I had to leave because I knew I had to go to Winston-Salem because the Lord wanted me to pray with Tracy. And it was almost like the Lord was speaking to me in an audible voice, that was what I needed to do because he needed to confirm it in my heart that she was the one that needed to speak today. And the Lord did that. So, Tracy, I want you to come on and share with us whatever the Lord has on your heart this morning. I appreciate you ladies being here again.
I know this is my home church, and I've probably been up here a billion times, but I'm extremely nervous. I may pass out. Not sure about that yet. If I do, it'll be a hard hit. But I want to thank the Lord for the opportunity. I want to thank the Lord for the things he allows in our life. And we have stories to tell, even though they're rough and they're hard. It's all about his grace and his mercy and his goodness to us. And I thank him for that this morning, and I thank the Lord for y'all being here, and what a blessing these ladies' conferences that have been to all of us and to all of y'all. And so I'm going to try to. My first sermon I gave about a month or so ago at another ladies' conference. I went over 40 minutes, so pray I don't this time. My husband said, "Your first sermon, really?" Anyway, just picking, but. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself in the beginning. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, between that time, the Lord was dealing with, well, he wasn't dealing with me. He was just letting me know that he was real, and I thought that I needed to be saved. So I went to the altar and, and prayed the prayer, got baptized and all that stuff. And things were different in my life at that time. Like, I felt different, things looked different. But really what that was not salvation. God just really revealed to me that the God I've been hearing about all these years, because I was in my grandmother raised me. She was involved in church, in the Christian school there, so I was in church and Christian school all the time. And so he was just letting me know that he was real. And then when I was 13, he did deal with me the first time. And I was with some teenagers on the back pew, of course, and I did not go to the altar or anything. And then when I was 17, in high school, I got pregnant, and I had my first child, a little girl. Her name's Chansley. And she was a newborn, and my mom had asked me to come to her church. And any of y'all local probably know Charles Worley. He's not with us no more. He's passed away. But Providence Road Baptist Church is where she went, and I went down there, and I remember at the altar call, when he gave altar call, I was standing up, I was holding my baby, and my sister was standing beside of me, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, just like bam, just as hard as could be, like conviction fell on me. And I knew what it was because I'd been in church all my life. I knew what conviction was. I've been around things of God. I prayed all these years. I'd pray, say my prayers at night, talk to God, things like that. And then, but that day I was a wreck, and I was standing in that pew feeling like I was going to buckle. My knees were going to buckle. I was shaking. I was sweating. And I told my sister, I said, "You're going to have to hold her. I got to go to the altar." So I go down there. When I get down there, all of a sudden, I get down on my knees after all that conviction and going down there, and God's gone. It's like he left me. As soon as I hit that altar, he was gone. All the conviction was gone. It was like I was there lifeless. There was nothing. And I remember having my hands down like this on the altar. I said, "God, where did you go? Like, I knew that was you. Where did you go?" And I thought to myself, oh God, that's it. I'm not going to he's gone. He dealt with me, and I didn't respond in enough time, and he's gone, and I didn't even know if I'd have that chance back again. And so, for years, I went looking for him. I was looking for him in preaching. When I went to church, I was seeking him is what I was doing. And this is the first time that the word seek really got me, like I was seeking the Lord. But we only seek the Lord because he seeks us first. And he was seeking me, so that in return got me seeking him. And so from 17, for years after that, I would seek him, and I'd listen to gospel music all the time, just all the time, trying to get that back, trying to get him to come back to me. And because I wanted him. I knew that I needed him, and I was afraid he was never coming back. And my heart was so troubled. And so for the next year and a half, I'd met, actually, Chansley was born August 1st, and I met my husband of that December, that same year, 1994. And so, I started dating him and everything, and about a year and a half after Chansley was born, I had twin boys. We had twin boys. I wasn't married at the time, and we had an apartment, and so our boys were really sick. One of the twins, the youngest one, he had a thing called pyloric stenosis. He couldn't keep his milk down, so he had to go and have surgery. When he came home from having his surgery, the other twin got RSV and had to go in the hospital. So as he was getting better and getting ready to come home, the other twin that had just had surgery got RSV, and he was really sick. Well, he got so bad that he actually died at Fry Hospital, and they had to shock his heart. They had to send him to Baptist Hospital, and then he got a blood transfusion. He was pumped full of steroids, and so we were down there. This was all happened within the first 2 months that my boys were born, and so we were there at Baptist Hospital till January of 1997, and then over that year and the next year, we were just in and out of the hospital all the time with the boys. They were sick, something all the time. We spent more time at the hospital than at home, and so in about 1998, my heart just had all it could take. I couldn't do this no more. I watched my boys go through so much, and I thought, Lord, I knew who to go to. I knew who we needed. There was prayer going up for them and everything, and I wasn't in church hardly. And they were constantly sick. I was at home or in the hospital but so the Lord started dealing with me about getting my kids in church and getting in church there again. He started seeking me to seek him again. So I started going back to church. My husband and I weren't married at the time, so he moved back home to his grandma's, and I stayed there with the kids. And when he did come, he slept in another room, because we're trying to do things right, and as best I know how, because I wasn't even saved then. And but so whenever when I started going back to church, it was real heavy on my heart about God touching. The biggest thing was that God touched my boys, their health, because so many times, I just didn't know what was going to happen with them, if they was going to die, if it was, what was going to happen the next time they got really bad sick, and they started having seizures, and so that was another thing. It was from fever, and we were just, it was a trying time. So that for that whole year, I was praying and seeking God, and every night when I put the kids down and I would pray, I'd say, God, if I truly ain't saved, would you please save me? Let me know. Like, I'd see people that were real, and I thought, I know I do all the outwardly things. I'm going to church. I'm faithful all the time. We sing in the choir. We sing specials. I help in Sunday school. But something just wasn't right. Like, I just didn't have something deep down like they did. And I didn't know at the time, but it was that joy and that peace. I didn't really have that. I had all the things on the outside, but the inside was as empty as it could be. And, in 1999, October 25th was a Friday, and my mother-in-law wanted to keep my boys, and because of their condition, we didn't want to be with, like, me or my husband be without them, or we didn't want them to be by themselves without us, so he went and stayed with his mom that weekend so that the boys could stay there. So it was me and my daughter Chansley stayed at our house, and that weekend, my heart was just so messed up. My life, everything, I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was getting sick. All these things were happening to me, and I didn't understand what was going on in my life, and I didn't realize this was conviction I was going through at this time, and that there was a war going on for my soul. I didn't even have a clue that that's what it was. And so all weekend I was a mess, and my grandma had asked me, was I going to go to church with her? And I was like, yeah, we're going to go to church, blah, blah. And so Sunday morning come, and I had all the emotions, mad, sad, I was fighting mad. I mean, it's just all these things were going on with me. And so I take my daughter, I thought, I'm not going to church. I'm not going anywhere. And so I get my daughter, we go upstairs, I get to give her a bath to get ready for church. Well, on the way up there, all of a sudden, fear grips her and me, and she said, Mom, I'm scared, and starts running up the steps. And I thought, I feel it too. I was thinking to myself, I'm scared too. And I thought, I'm not staying at this place by myself today. And so I get in the car when my grandma comes and go to church, and all the way there, I'm like, Lord, I don't know what's going on with me right now, Lord, but please don't let me come back home like this. I can't go through this another day. I was miserable, and my heart needed something, but I didn't realize he had come back this time. I didn't realize that. It was him, and I didn't realize it at the time. It wasn't time for me to realize it yet. But anyway, on that morning, I remember the Sunday school teacher, and he was saying, I thought I was saved for years, but I wasn't. I was lost, but then the Lord gloriously saved me. And then the preacher, he got up and he's talking about his wife, saying that she thought she was saved for years, but then God showed her she wasn't, and she got saved. And then when he gave the altar call, and I stepped out onto that, stepped out of my pew onto the aisle, it was like God, he just spoke to my heart so strong and said, you're lost, and this is it. Like, this is your time. And I remember looking at my grandma, and I call her Nanny. I said, Nanny, I'm lost. And about that time, when it all happened, it just happened so fast like that. And it was like literally, like, not physically, but spiritually, I just fell in God's arms. Like, I just fell in his arms. Like, you're back, it's you. It was him. This one I'd searched for so long to come back. He came back. He came and got me that morning, and he saved my soul. And I thank him for that. And I thought, whenever I was 17 and all that happened to me at my mom's church and he had left, I was thinking about this verse over in Song of Solomon, and it talks about how I sought him, but I found him not. The maiden, she was grievous because she wanted him. She needed him. She wanted to be with him and be around him, but she couldn't. She couldn't find him. She went all through the streets searching for him, and that's what I was doing from 17 to 22. 5 years, that means number of grace. And I was searching for him, and it really wasn't that I found him. He came to me. But all this time, the Lord let me know what he was doing. He was looking at me through the lattice all that time. He had his eye on me. But that day, he stepped out from behind that lattice, and he saved my soul. And I thank him for that. I thank him for not giving up on me, for seeking me all those years. And I think about the verse, too. It says, Jeremiah 29:13, and ye shall seek me and find me when ye shall search for me with all your heart. And that's exactly what he had me doing, searching for him, which is a form of seeking. And So 4 months later, after I got saved in 1999, my husband and I got married October 15th, and our 29th anniversary is getting ready to come up. Thank the Lord for that. And thank the Lord that, I could have just been one of those girls by the wayside that nobody ever cared for. I had a teenage pregnancy, but God really, really blessed me and gave me somebody who loved my daughter. That wasn't his, and who loved me. And I thank the Lord for that and for keeping us together all these years. I don't take that lightly. That is a blessing at this time. When people are just, the devil's ravaging homes and stuff right now. And I thank the Lord for what he's done. Well, it ain't been easy, that's for sure. But anyway, so we used to go to a church near our home, and we'd come here and visit when they'd have, revival meetings, things like that. And we loved it. My husband actually went to school here for a little while, and he met Pastor Daniel, and he just absolutely loved him to death. And my husband had a hard life growing up, super hard. And so when he met Pastor Daniel, it was like the dad he never had before, and he just really appreciated him so much. And I thank God for putting Pastor Daniel in his life. And my husband had ordered a bunch of tapes and the book Array for God from Camp Zion. And I remember looking through those books, or looking through that book and reading some on it about these, and it was telling about all the awesome things that, happened at Camp Zion and about Brother Ray and stuff, and it started talking about some women that really, loved God and had a heart for God, and they were the prayer warriors, and they backed Brother Ray, they backed Camp Zion, and, they gave their heart to God, their pastor, and their church. And I wanted that, and I didn't know anything about a mantle and all that stuff then. I didn't know anything about stuff like that. But I just knew that I would like to have that. I'd like to be like that. You know, we always have somebody we want to be like, and that was what, but that wasn't me. That was God putting that in my heart to seek after that for my life. And so in 2000, Brian felt like the Lord wanted us to be here in the beginning, to start coming here. And we talked about it back and forth for a while, and the devil started fighting us so strong. It was terrible, things we was going through and stuff. And finally, you know, Brian's like, I think one Sunday, he's just like, this is it. We got to go. So we came, and we started coming here. And our first time on a Sunday was in May 2001. And so we came here, and then a couple months later, I found out I was pregnant with our last child, and it was my daughter Elizabeth. And the Lord, it's like a new beginning the Lord gave us with her, you know. And I thank the Lord for that. We needed that at that time. We came to new beginning. God gave us a new beginning. Everything was just a new beginning. Everything was going to be new. And I was so grateful. You know, I didn't realize at the time, new beginning, all this was new for us. And it was a new beginning, a whole new chapter in our life. And so for the next few years coming here to New Beginning, I heard things I had never heard, and I've been in church my whole life. And things Pastor Daniel I was like literally a sponge soaking it up. I couldn't get enough. And I have notebooks. I have totes of notebooks where I have wrote, and he speaks really fast and long, so I have all these. It takes about one notebook takes, you know, like 2 sermons. But so I was just, I mean, it was, but I loved it. And he always says, you bloom where you're planted. And that's exactly what was happening. I didn't know all that at that time. I had no clue about any of that stuff. And so in 2007, we had our first power conference, and Brother Ralph Sexton was the preacher here, preaching it. And it was super sweet. The spirit was sweet. Everything was just precious. And one morning, God had been burdened about my brother, and God, you know, put him on my heart about praying for him, and I did. And but one morning, I got up. I was a preschool teacher at this time, and Elizabeth went to preschool with me, and she had a class there, and then my other 3 went to Heritage Christian School. So I got up, made my husband's breakfast. He went to work, and then I started to get ready. Well, all of a sudden, something hit me strong, and I thought, what in the world is this? I felt like I needed to pray, so I prayed. Well, it just got stronger, and I prayed again. I just kept hearing pray, and so it kept getting worse, and all I could think of was like, Lord, I said, Lord, I don't know what to do, what to pray about. I've been praying, like, and it wouldn't go away. It just kept getting stronger. And so I'd go in the bathroom while they were up getting ready for school, and I'd close the door in the throne room, because I was really in the throne room at this time with the Lord. And I was just like talking to him. I said, God, you're going to you know, help me. I don't know what to pray, but I've prayed, Lord, I've prayed. And I kept saying it over and over and over. And he just kept saying, pray. So I called work, and I was a mess, and I was bawling. I said, I'm so sorry I'm not going to be able to come today. She said, what's wrong with you? And I said, I just got to stay home and pray. She said, is there something we can help you pray about? I said, I don't know. I don't know what to pray about. I just know God said, pray. Stay, you know, I need to be here to pray. And it was just, I still could not grasp it. I know that the story of Samuel and God calling him come across my mind, but I was so distraught that, you know, I couldn't put my finger on what's going on about this praying thing and what was I supposed to pray about. So my husband calls it like lunchtime, and I tell him, and so he speaks with a man that goes to church here, Luke Hall, and I'm supposing he's the one that went and talked to Pastor Daniel. But anyway, so Pastor Daniel had talked to me about this and was asking me what was going on, and I told him. And then he explained to me that, you know, how God calls preachers to preach, calls people to the mission field, but he calls people to pray too. That's a ministry. And it all just like sunk in me. I was like the light bulb came on. And I said at the other ladies' conference, it's so important that you're at the church you're supposed to be in, and that you're under the shepherd you're supposed to be under, because God lets him know what his sheep are going through. And it was like when he talked, you know, and told me all that, it just all clicked with me. And but that was a lot bigger than what I thought. I thought, okay, yeah, you know, I'm gonna pray. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to pray, you know. And of course, it went a lot deeper than that. In 2009, we started going to Camp Zion our first time, and it was awesome. And it was just like a little place for you just to go, like a little oasis, and it was awesome. But we went back again in 2010. And in 2010, this time was a little bit different. And so we would go in the little old church they had. There was like First Original Churches I remember at that time, it had like an old potbelly stove and stuff like that, and there was old wood, everything, and it was just like it was years ago. And through the windows at night, you could see like the moon shining through and things like that. And Pastor Daniel would turn the lights off and we would listen sometimes to preaching, music, or he'd have his flashlight, and he'd be looking at his Bible and reading to us. And he did that because it makes it more personal. When nobody's looking around, nobody can see you. And so he turned the light off that night, and he had asked me and Chansley to come up and sing, and we were going to do that. And so we go up there. We sit on the front pew because he's still talking, so we just sit down. And, he just got into reading, and he started reading Psalm 24. And he got to verse 6, and it says, you'll have to read this when you go home sometime. It's awesome. But he got to verse 6, and it says, this is the generation of them that seek him, that seek thy face, O Jacob. And when he said that, there's that word seek again in my life again. And I was like, there it is, seek. Well, he goes on down and he's reading some more. And then he says, and it says this a couple times in there, but he gets to verse 9, and there's only 10 verses. And it says, lift up your heads, O ye gates, and even lift them up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. And when he said that this last time, it was as if when you turned to the back of that little old church, there was 2 glass doors, and there were wood at the bottom. And it was like those doors spiritually just flung open, and God came in that place. He walked down that middle aisle, and I'm sure everybody in there felt the same way. He walked down that middle aisle, but it was like he came right over there to where I was. And, what a blessing it is that God can be everywhere with everybody at one time. So we can all share him. And so when Pastor Daniel... he kept reading, read the last verse, and it was like, I remember getting up and going to this little step where they had a little tiny choir loft in that little old church, and I remember standing there, and all of a sudden people started praying and praising, and it just got big in there because he came in, and it just kept growing bigger and bigger. And then, with me personally, it was like the Lord just took me out of that little old church to a place with him. My body was there. It was like this outer body experience. I'd never experienced anything like that before. But it was the sweetest thing I'd ever been in. And God was so real in that church. And I could hear everybody. It was like they were distant, but I could hear everybody down there praising and just loving on God, and God loving on all of them. And the Lord just let me see what life I could have with him, in this life of prayer, and this life with him. And so I feel like at that point in my life, that's where the Lord sanctified that call to prayer in my life. And I remember, and I don't know how long this went on. I just know that I kind of heard things fading, people, like it calming down. And it felt to me like the Lord was bringing me back from this place with him. And I remember saying, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. Don't leave. Don't leave again. Don't leave me. Because he was so real. I thought, if he gets any more real, we're going to be raptured out of this church. That's exactly what it felt like. I mean, that's how real he was. And so we did. I felt like the Lord had brought me into his banqueting house, and his banner over me was love that night. It's what it felt like. He'd brought me to his place. And, anyway, so that was a sweet, sweet time in my life. And I felt like that night, I remember telling Pastor Daniel afterward, I said, I married him tonight. And I didn't even know what I was saying. And he said, this young boy, he said, well, we married him. Yeah, we married him until we get to heaven. Pastor Daniel said, well, by faith she did. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what it was. But so after that, when we came back home, I was a wreck for a few days. I couldn't even do anything. I was just so wrapped up in him and everything that had happened. And he gave me this verse. This is my life verse, Psalm 27:8. When thou saidest, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. There's seek again. So obviously my life was about seeking God. And so after that, I started homeschooling my children. And God got us in a place. And y'all know God has everything. He owns everything. He could give us whatever he wants. And I asked for a lot. I asked for big things. I asked for a lot of things, but we got little, in my opinion, you know what I'm saying? Because God wanted to grow my faith, and he wanted to grow this prayer life. And so God got us down to nothing, so we had to look to him for everything. Pray it in, Just like Sunshine was talking about George Mueller, we've been in those places. I've been in those places. We didn't have to be. I was a daughter of the king. I didn't have to be in those places. But those are special places. Those are places where God says, you know what, I got something for you down here, so I'm going to equip you here with it. And that's exactly what he did. He equipped us here so he could bless there. And I thank the Lord for that. I wouldn't go back and change any of it. My children saw things that only God could have done. And they know that. They know nobody else knew. We got up, we prayed, and God delivered. And they knew it. And I never take that back. You know, I used to have time with the Lord before I started homeschooling. When he dealt with me about homeschooling, I thought that he had lost his mind. Because I thought, well, Lord, I have all this time with you. Why would you want me to do that? Like, I don't want to do that. I did not want to do that. But I did. And that was, too, we went to prayer meetings. We'd go to prayer meetings Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I'm telling you, sometimes our prayer meetings started at 11 o'clock. Sometimes we'd be here till 4. I mean, they were awesome. They were really, really good prayer meetings, and God just showed up and showed out. So over the next few years, God was doing mighty things. In 2014, in October, God opened the womb of our church and saved quite a bit of people here, and one of those was my daughter, Chansley, and that's a whole other story. We have a CD about her being saved if y'all want to get that. I won't expound on that right now, but it's a lot. And but anyway, I will tell you this right quick. A verse that God gave me right before he saved Chansley was, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, and then everything went crazy. But then God fixed it all. And it seems like that's how it works. God gives you something, you learn to trust him, and all of a sudden he lets the bottom fall out. And you're like, well, what's this about? But then he just brings it all back together and fixes it all. And so then Chansley, in 2018, Chansley got married. And then in 2020, Elizabeth graduated high school and moved out. So that left me and Brian with the boys. And my boys were drinking, and I didn't know at this time that that's what they were doing. I didn't know that they were doing things behind the scenes when they'd go places. I didn't know. You know, you pray for your children. God gave me verses. He gave me promises for my children. All through the years, different promises are all written in my Bible. And they didn't grow up around that. We on purpose did not let them around things like that because I didn't want them, that to be in their life. They were in church all the time. They were here. They grew up here. They went to Camp Zion. Even my boys went to Camp Zion more than I went to Camp Zion. And so they were just around godly people and godly things all the time. Well, in March of 22, Caleb, one of the twins, the oldest twin, he left. He said, I got to get help. I need help for drinking and drugging. He said, I got to get some help. And so he leaves, and he goes off to get help somewhere at a home. And as he's gone, he gets into some trouble, of course, and he calls me every now and then, but God, my heart was so fearful that something was going to happen to him. He had been sheltered all these years, and I just thought, Lord, something's going to happen to him, but God didn't let nothing. God, he always, every time I'd pray about it, it's just like God was just there reminding me of those promises he gave me. Caleb, and even when, he was gone, he was here and there, he was in different states all the time. And, well, Caspian, our sweet little grandbaby, was born May 15th of 2022, and the Lord really just touched our hearts with that, and I thank the Lord for him. He's been such a sweet blessing. It seemed like when everything's going crazy with my boys, God blessed with this sweet little baby boy, and I thank the Lord for that, and I thank the Lord that, he knows exactly what we need when we need it in our lives, and so that was on May 15th of 2020. And then in July of 2020, at the end of July, I had this little pot my grandmother had gave me. It looked like a little farmhouse, cute little pot, but it was really old. It had been in our family for years. And I'd been wanting it, and she gave it to me. And I remember I had it, sitting on my little table, and I was had it some stuff in it decorated. And one day I was cleaning, and I knocked that pot off, and it was just this little cute, short, little round pot like me. And so I knocked the pot off, and when I did, it just I felt like my heart broke, and I thought, oh my goodness, why did that have to happen? I was like, Lord, why did this happen? That's, special to me. That's something special. And I really didn't know why I liked that pot so much at first, but anyway, well, I picked it up, and I put all the pieces in, and I was going to go throw it away, and the Lord was like, no. like that can be fixed. And my son Jacob was there at the time. He said, we can glue it back together. I was crying, I was upset about this. And I thought, well, I don't like this over a spot. Well, when I went to go take the pot to put it on top of my refrigerator, the Lord said, that's going to be you. And I really didn't understand that at that time. We all have God, through our seasons of our life, he does a breaking in our lives. If you're saved, that's what God does to grow you. And so it was about maybe not a whole month had passed. Caleb had come home and he was going to come home for the weekend. I was going to take him he had a court date on Monday, and I was going to take him that, and then he was leaving out on a bus to go to Texas where he was going to be moving. Well, something happened, and the ticket didn't go through. He was supposed to leave on Friday, and he didn't get to leave. And Jacob had been getting into more trouble, and I noticed that Jacob obviously had been doing more harder drugs. Something else was going on. It wasn't just like I know that he had been smoking pot and drinking, but this was different. He changed him big time. And he had just lost his job on Thursday, and Caleb was supposed to leave on Friday, and the ticket, he couldn't get the ticket, so he had to wait till Monday. Well, Jacob, I told Jacob, I said, Jacob, me and Dad's got to go somewhere. This is Saturday morning. I said, but when we come back, I said, I want you to call and do an assessment at this place that can take you in to give you, it's like therapy he needed to be somewhere where he can get some help for his addiction. Well, he said, I ain't got nothing wrong with me. I don't need to go. I said, do it, or we're going to have to kick you out tonight. Like, we can't take this no more. You're going to have to either on the street or you're going to have to go to this place. So when we're gone, we ain't even gone 15 minutes. Caleb calls and he says, Mom, you got to get back here. The ambulance is here, and so we go back, and Jacob's in the ambulance, and I go up in the ambulance, and he is as white as a ghost, and it's like he just is staring. He can't respond to us or anything really, and so the ambulance driver said, well, I had to give him an excessive amount of Narcan to bring him back. And what had happened was Caleb kept trying to get a hold of Jacob, kept beating on his door, and he wouldn't answer. So Caleb goes in his room, and he says Jacob's laying there with his fingertips are blue and his lips are blue. And he says he jerks him off the bed onto the floor, calls 911, starts doing compressions until the ambulance gets there. And then, and all this happened within 15 minutes. And we actually we were just going to town, and we didn't even get where we was going. And so Jacob goes to the hospital, and naturally, because of what was going on, they didn't find nothing but marijuana in his blood, so they sent it off because it doesn't, fentanyl does not show up in the blood work like that. So they had to send it off, and I knew that that's what it was. A guy had been selling it and doing it at a job he worked at, and I'd seen that guy's vehicle parked at another job Jacob went to, and I thought that morning something's up. So anyway, that's what it was, and so they sent Jacob off to a rehab, and from the hospital. Jacob went off, then Caleb left on Monday, and so after that, it was, this was probably, because this was August, and then, so for a few months, the boys were in different places. When they got through with one place, rehab, they go to another place, and it's back and forth, and they're called Sober Living America homes, and they would go in those, and they're not really that great because you can still get stuff on the street, and things. They're not really, you're not contained, and so that's what they were doing, and I had started working at the daycare where my little grandbaby was going in October, and my husband, we were by ourselves from the time Jacob and Caleb left in August all the way to December. Here we were by ourselves. We'd never been by ourselves all this time, and we were soaking each other up, and we were just newlyweds, and because I had kids ever since I was 17, and God was loving it, and it was just us, and I loved it because nobody was there but us, and I was like, oh my gosh, and we went to the beach together, and I thought, let's do crazy things. Well, we didn't do nothing crazy. I fell asleep in the car, just crazy stuff, so, but I was so excited to be with him like that, and I just feel like God really started mending a lot of things because we'd gotten distant over the years from work. He was working all these jobs, I started working these jobs, and we didn't see each other much, and so I was soaking all that up too, and then the Lord, in January, we had our power conference. We always have it the first week of January, and my husband started a new job, and this job kept him away. He only got to come to the power conference once. And this was January, this year, January 2023. And I was really sad about that. And I know this job just he was excited, so I wanted to be excited for him, but something inside was just like, And one day when I was at preschool, teaching, the Lord put on my heart to pray for him, that Satan's coming at him, Satan's coming at us. And so I did. And I texted him and told him, I said, I don't know what form, how it's going to happen, but I'm just telling you what God said. And so during that power conference, it was awesome. It was sweet. There wasn't like a bunch of like shouting and going on and nothing like that. It was a deepness. God was working in people's hearts, and he did that for me, that week. And at the end of the week, Pastor Daniel said, Tracy, I think, this is going to be the year God's really going to do something. I felt like that too. I thought, oh yes, I feel really like God's going to really answer some of our prayers and things. Well, the week after that, one day, the Lord just spoke to my heart and said, this is going to be a season of sorrow in your life. And I thought, what does that mean? But immediately, this is what the Lord let me know to ask him for, because I wouldn't have thought about this, for 3 things. One was that I'd pass all the tests, and the other one was that I would withstand all the temptations, because it's not me anyway, it's him, and he's allowed me to go through this. Obviously, he's put me through it, so he's going to have to take care of all this. And that I'd come forth as gold to shine for his glory, not me, not for me to be seen, for him to be seen. He was doing all this. This was all about him. It wasn't about us. He just used us. It was all him. And Job 23:10 was one of the verses that come to my mind. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. And I didn't even understand all that at that time. I just trusted him. That's all I knew to do, is just trust him and take him at his word. And a few weeks later, Elizabeth and the baby needed to move back in with us. So they did, and it was a joy. It was different. It was hard because, we'd been by ourselves and everything, and now this little baby, and then our daughter moves back in. But it was a joy, and we were very glad for them to come back. And so I was taking the baby daycare, keeping him, and then I had taught preschool there. Then I'd come home and bring him home with me because Elizabeth had to work late evenings, and my husband was gone all the time. He didn't get home till 8:30, 9 o'clock when it's time for me to go to bed, because I had to get up early to be back at the preschool. And so while that was going on, that was really hard, and that was like about the third week in January. Well, then a week later, Jacob tells me he's going out to Oklahoma, and it didn't settle. I said, Jacob, I don't think you should do that. I think you should stay in Raleigh where you are. There are good people out there. They're helping you. He actually got in trouble and got kicked out a few times. They let him come back, and he wasn't supposed to because he was caught drinking. And, he goes on to Oklahoma. One night, he gets robbed. He said he was walking through the store. He gets robbed. He gets beat up, and he gets knocked out, and he's left there till the next morning in a parking lot. And he calls me, and he the next day from somebody's phone, and he tells me what happened. And he said there was 3 guys, and they done that. Well, anyway, I knew he needed to get back home, and so we got him a ticket, and he got back home, and he was beat up. He looked terrible, and I thought, he could have died. He could have died out there. Satan tried to take him out, and I know that's what it was. And and I thought. All I could do was just thank the Lord that, he touched him. And this was on February. This was in February 4th, when he actually had come home. I got him a bus ticket, and he was home. And the day that I picked him up, that morning, we immediately started looking. I took him to take a shower and all that, and then we started looking for places for him to go because we knew we couldn't let him come back home. It wasn't time. He just could not come home. If he did, it was going to start all over again, and we knew that. We could not let him do that. And that's hard, to not let your children come back home. It's hard to say no, and leave them, because my boys, they slept on the street a lot of times. And they didn't have nowhere to go. And I knew that, but I couldn't do anything about it. But, God just really just had a touch. And he does, and I'm sure with Melissa too, he touches you and just gives you that peace to know, even though you're scared to death, he gives you that peace to know he's got them. He's going to take care of them. And he does, and he did. And so because if Satan had his way, they would have definitely, he'd killed them. And so then, while we're going throughout the day trying to getting this place that it opens within about 30 minutes, it's going to open, and Jacob was going to go in there and talk to them about staying there, is actually the Salvation Army. Caleb called me, and I was in the car with Jacob, and Caleb was a mess. He was flipping out. Something was wrong, and I knew it. And he was telling me something bad happened. He thinks he killed somebody and all this stuff, and I knew that wasn't Caleb. And Caleb, I told him, I said, Caleb, something's wrong. Well, he kept hanging up the phone on me, and he wouldn't let me, finish what I was trying to say and or get from him what I needed to get from him. I couldn't understand him, half what he was saying. Well, then all night, so Jacob got into that place, so I left and went home. All night, Caleb was calling, saying a few things, hanging up, and he was talking real low, and he was, Mom, they're after me out here, and he had went to Oregon, and I begged him not to go, but he had went to Oregon, so I was on this side of the United States, he was on this side of the United States, and I couldn't get to him, and so he told me, he said, something bad's happened, and I need help, and so anyway, the next day, he calls me, and he's still the same way, just paranoid, going crazy. And it's like, I just realized, I said, Caleb, you have gotten a hold of something that's got you paranoid, and you're messed up on something. That's what it was. And this went on for 3 days. The third day, he was in a hospital out there, and he called me, and a social worker told him, said, let me speak to your mom. And so she told me, she said, ma'am, she said, your son is not going to make it on the streets of Oregon. She said, he'll die out here. She said, he doesn't belong here in a place like this. And things that she was telling me about him, I can't help but think that God let her see that hedge about Caleb. That's what I think it was. I think God let her see there was a hedge about this boy, because she paid for him a ticket to get back home. And she said, if I give him a ticket and meal tickets, will you be there to pick him up? I said, yes, ma'am. And I thought, you know what? God, you just let her see that hedge about him, that protection, and she knew he wasn't supposed to be there. And so he comes home, but at first, before he came home, he wanted me to call the police department and ask if they knew his name and had he done something wrong. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I had looked up on their news out there, and the news said, yes, there was 2 women killed. But it was last year, and the man done it. They got him, all this and that. Caleb had read that, gotten a hold of a drug. He was so drunk that a guy gave him a hit of something while he was drunk, and that's what happened to him. I'm not sure what it was. He doesn't know what it was. But anyway, he was telling me they were after him. They're all going to kill him. Everybody in Oregon, the people at the hospital is going to kill him. I mean, all these things. It was crazy. So when he gets on that bus to come home, it takes him a few days to get here. But so when he gets here, he spends the night at the house, and then the next day I take him to a place that, gives him some help and stuff. And then, so there he is, and he's going and back to another place now. So he's okay. Well, then, this was on February the 14th, and that night something happened that I don't want to speak about right now, but this is my breaking point. This is where I broke. I couldn't take nothing no more. And I thought, the devil's come at me through my children, through my husband. He's come at me through my husband's job, through everything. And I thought, this thing that just happened now, I can't do this. I can't. Lord, this is it. And this is where I draw the line. I ain't taking none of this no more. And I thought I was going to just lose it. I thought I've come this far, Lord, and I'm going to lose it all right now. This is where it ends, And my husband, he wasn't there through all this much because he was working that job that he wasn't supposed to be at. I tried to tell him, but you don't get a word from God, give it to somebody, and then just ignore it, right? And so anyway, but he did. He ignored it because he loved it. It was a good job. It just wasn't a good job for him. But so I would get in my car at night, and I would go to a dark parking lot and just scream and cry out to God and beg him to touch my mind and help me, because I was literally going crazy and I needed him so bad to help me. And then I remember trying to go to a hotel, and I wanted to go stay by myself, and I was begging God all this time, God, please just get me away from this job. I love kids, but I didn't like kids at that time. I thought, I don't even really think I like kids, and they were just driving me crazy, and it wasn't them, it was really me, at that preschool and then the daycare. And I said, God, please get me away from my home. Get me away from my job. I need to seek you. I need to hear from you, God. Please help me. And, and I was going to go stay in a hotel a couple times, but then I chickened out to go stay by myself, so I'd go back home, and I'd drive one county over to go. But anyway, so because there wasn't much up here that I didn't want to stay at, but so anyway, I was begging God to help me, and when you think things can't get any worse, like it's just bad, this is it, It's just like all of a sudden, the bottom that fell out, there's another bottom, and that bottom fell out. And so I went to work. Well, I talked to Caleb. He had gotten into a place actually in Statesville, which is not far from here, and to get help down there. And he said he really liked it, and they had cameras on him for the first month. They watch everything you do in your room. You can listen, like their cameras have voice, like they can talk back and forth to him. He can talk to them. And I talked to him for that whole week up to Saturday, and we talked. And then Sunday, we had some people over, and I didn't get to call him. And and I thought about it, and then I thought, well, I'll call him later. Well, I did. And then, you know how it is when you have church. It's not a day of rest. It's church. A little bit of home, church. So, I was just so busy that day, which we love church. I'm not down. We love it. We need it. It's our hospital. But I'm just saying, and then you have company over in between times. You don't have time to do other things. So it just kind of got pushed back in the back of my mind to call Caleb. And he was doing good. He had actually been asking people and talking to people, like in our family and some people at church, about God and about the things of God. Like, that's his curiosity had gotten aroused, and I was like, wow, this is different, And so on Monday morning, I was talking to my husband. I was at my job. He's at his, and I was talking to him on the phone. And I got a beep, and I said... And I looked, and I thought, I don't know that number. I ain't going to answer it. So I just kept talking. Well, they called right back, and I noticed that they had sent me a message on Messenger. And I said, and it just hit me. It's about Caleb. So I said, hold on a minute. I think this phone call might be about Caleb. And I clicked over, and when I did, she said, is this Tracy, Caleb's mom, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah. She said, Caleb's down here at Statesville in the hospital, Iredell County, and if you want to see him, then you need to get down here now. And, like, everything started going crazy in my mind. And I said, what do you mean? She said, he's overdosed. I said, overdosed? I said, how can he overdose? I said, they have cameras on him. How can he overdose? And who gave it to him? That was the first thing I'd ask her. She said, I don't know, ma'am. You're just going to have to talk to the doctors. You're going to have to get down here if you want to see him. So, naturally, I leave work. And all the way to work, I called my friend Donna, and then I had called Pastor Daniel. But I was screaming and crying out to God, God, please don't let my baby die. Please, God, don't do this. All this has happened all this time, and God, please. Because out in Oregon, Caleb could have got killed too, but God spared him and brought him home. And I thought, Lord, please. And I said, God, this is not in those promises you gave me. None of this is. You can't let him die. And it was such a shock, just a shock to me. I couldn't even believe it. So I just spoke with him a couple of days before, and he was doing great, And something in my heart just let me know it was not an overdose. I just felt like that wasn't true. And so when I got down there, they had, of course, took blood, didn't find anything. They said they had gave him Narcan when they found him. When they found him, he was not breathing. Hardly. He was barely breathing. And they said when they went back and looked on the video, he'd been with only little oxygen for a long time. And he was foaming at the mouth. And they said that, so they gave him a bunch of Narcan. Well, it didn't work. And at the hospital, they gave him more Narcan, and it didn't work, which would tell you, well, obviously he hadn't overdosed it. Because if he did, then the Narcan would have helped him. So one of the nurses told me in there, she said, honey, I don't think that this was this was an overdose. She said, they think that, he had aspirated and it got into his lungs. But she said, when we clean his lungs out, there's nothing there. And so I was like, well, I told one of the nurses, I said, let me tell you something. I said, I wasn't being ugly, but I was being mama. And I said, don't be telling people that my son is an overdose. I said, you don't know that yet. I said, wait until that blood work comes back, and then we'll see what. I said, I'm telling you right now, that's not what it was. And when it came back, of course, it wasn't. It wasn't that. And it was just, Caleb had been sick since October, and his lungs had gotten so bad. He'd taken antibiotics and different stuff, but nothing was working. And his lungs had gotten so bad that they collapsed on him. And he had pneumonia very bad. And he actually had a few types of pneumonia and infections going on inside his lungs. Well, so this was on Monday. Come Wednesday, I told my husband, I said, if he's not any better by Wednesday, I said, we're going to have to see if they'll send him to Baptist. I think he needs to go to Baptist. Well, that doctor said, we're doing all that they would do down there. Well, Friday, I called and let the lady know I was coming. His nurse, she was really sweet, and I was asking her if I could bring her anything. Well, 35 minutes later, I arrive, and they're going crazy in that room where Caleb's at, and they've already called, and they're Baptist, and they're going to fly him to Baptist. And I said, what happened? And she said, honey, I don't know. She said, we don't think he's going to make it. Like, we about lost him. And I was like, what? Y'all acted like everything. He was going to get better. It just takes time. And so I asked her, I said, can y'all just go out and, close the door? They're glass doors. You can see through them. But I said, can you just close the door a minute? And so Caleb was hooked up to all this stuff, And so I crawled up on top of him. He's a big boy, so I wasn't smothering him. But, but I crawled up on top of him as good as I could with all that stuff on him. And I started begging God for his life. And I said, please, God, please breathe life into him again. I said, all you have to do, God, is all you have to do is breathe. You can breathe into his lungs and breathe life into him. God, you can say the word and it'll happen. You can heal him, but, and then they come to get him. And so as they was flying off, me and Brian drive down there, and it was just, it's a horrifying thing, to see your child in that. So I hadn't talked to him. He had not been awake or nothing. This whole week he's in the hospital. And, since Saturday, I hadn't heard from him or anything. His eyes hadn't been open, nothing, no movement. They had him sedated. And so we get down to Baptist, and our other son, Jacob, he comes down there, and they get Caleb into the critical care there, the ICU, whatever, and they get him stable, and Jacob wants to spend the night with him in there because one person can stay. So me and Brian are going to go out, and I didn't want to leave the hospital, so we're going to go out there in the little waiting room. Oh, God. And we tried to sleep there, and it was a joke. So he said, we're going to have to go to a hotel. He just kept on and on more than I was. And so we went to a hotel, and the next morning, first thing, got up, come back. And so they were talking to us about, it's probably going to be a long haul for Caleb if he makes it. And so I told my husband, I said, well, I'm not going home. I'm not leaving this place until Caleb leaves with me. When he walks out of here, and he can walk out of here, I'll go. And I knew that. I knew I didn't want to leave him at all. And because we didn't know if he's going to make it. If one day from the next, if he's going to, just die or overnight or during the day. So anyway, we leave, and my husband leaves, and somebody told him there about a place we could stay at. And, they used to have like the Ronald McDonald houses when Jacob was there. Same hospital, same tower. Jacob was in the same one in his little, hooked up to the machines, life support. They were suctioning stuff out his lungs just like they were Caleb now, 26 years later. And we stayed at the Ronald McDonald house before. Well, when Brian comes back, he says, there's a place that they want us to stay at. And he said, it's called the CQ house. And I was like, SEEKYU was going through my mind. I said, CQ? Like SEK? He said, no, SEC, like State Employees Credit Union. Like, they put that on, and I was like, okay. I didn't even know State Employees Credit Union even did anything like that, but okay. We have been members there for years, and I never even know this. And I was like, that's not what I heard. God didn't speak SECU to my heart. He spoke SEEKYU, and I knew it, that God answered my prayer. He got me away to seek him. I thought it was going to be like this pretty island somewhere, and hot and beautiful, and it was nothing like that, nothing. And when you ask God for things, it normally the way you think it's going to be anyway. But so we got down there, and we were there. So he was at the one hospital for 1 week. We go to Baptist, and he's there already 2 weeks, and almost 2 weeks. It was a little over 2 weeks, and they come to us on a Thursday, and would come to me because my husband, I stayed there all day, all night, and my husband would get up and go to work the next morning because he's only 35 minutes away, and then he'd come back and stay and see Caleb and stay at night. Well, on Thursday, my mom and my grandma come down, and my mom was in the hospital room with me in the ICU there with Caleb, and the doctor come in, and he said, I just want to go ahead and tell you, he said, after 14 days, we don't like to keep them intubated. And he said, we're going to have to take it out and put a trach in, and he'll have to, breathe that way. And he said, so come Monday, and it was already after 14 days. And so come Monday, if he does not get any better, we're going to have to do this. And I thought to myself, no, that can't happen. And he said, and there's only 2 places in North Carolina that take patients like that, have to have a tracheotomy for life. And he said, and he was without oxygen, didn't have much oxygen all that time. He said, he's probably going to be brain dead. And he said, and he's going to be in a wheelchair. And he said, or you have the option of taking care of him or sending him off to another state that has these facilities. And I just kept shaking my head, and I said, that can't happen. I said, I can't accept that. I just kept telling him I can't accept that. And he's like, well, I understand. I was like, no, you don't know. I said, God gave me promises for my children. And so anyway, he leaves, and Friday morning comes, and it was early, about 3 or 4 o'clock, the midnight hour, and I get up to go to the bathroom. We're staying at that CQ house, and I get up to go to the bathroom, and I come back, and all of a sudden I felt this spirit of hate fill that room, just hate. And I thought, what is this about? And I got in the bed real quick, and then I just kind of sit there with my eyes wide open, staring into the darkness. And it was like the darkness was so thick, it was almost like it was real, like a form. And it was just demonic, is all it was. And I remember saying, I know what this is. Lord, I know what this is, and I know what's coming. And I knew it was the demons, and trying to scare you. And then all of a sudden, the fear gripped me that Caleb had died through the night. And I thought, I've been here before. I've been faced with this before, and I thought, you know what? I'm not going to call. I'm not going to bother with that. And so I started pleading the blood and praying and begging God to, just stop Satan and everything anyway. And he did. And so at one point, Brian had heard me, and he said, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't want to talk about it because, you're still scared to death." Just laying there, I was scared to death. And I said, "I want to talk about it. I'll tell you in the morning." So the next morning came, and I got up, and the Lord let me know that he wanted me to go over to the hospital, and he wanted me to pray for Caleb. And not only pray, but he wanted me to read the scriptures of the promises God gave me for my children and sing him some hymns. So that's what I did. I went over there, and I sung him some hymns. I read the scripture that God wanted me to read to him, and he was still non-responsive, because they had him so sedated. And they would, what they called prone him, and they would put him over on his stomach and lay his hands out and his feet out. And I know that was very uncomfortable, but he didn't know. But it looked awful. And it took about, because he's such a big boy, it took him over an hour to do it. So I'd go to a coffee shop or, just little things, just trying to get out for a little bit. And then, but I'd be sitting there at that hospital. And I remember a few times just sitting at the foot of his bed. I'd rub lotion on his feet, rub his legs, rub his hands, rub his head, and do all this stuff to him and talk to him throughout the day. And I'd sit there and I'd pray. And one day I was like, "Lord, you can do anything but fail. You can do anything. There's nothing too hard for you. And you can breathe life back into my son and make his lungs better. I know you can, Lord." And this was, before all this happened on Friday. And so me and Brian, after we go over there and I read to him and sing to him, the doctor comes in, and they want to show us the x-ray they just took of Caleb the night before. And when they showed us, they compared the one for where Caleb first went to the hospital and the one where Caleb is now. Now, they'd been giving him all this medicine and doing all kinds of awesome stuff for him, and they said, he's young, he's got that on his side, we think he's going to make it, it's just going to take time to heal. And his lungs were so bad, when they intubated him in the beginning, they had punctured his lung, and so his whole chest filled with air, and that took a couple days to go down. But they said, we really believe he's going to make it. Well, when they came in there and showed us that x-ray, it was a complete whiteout. There was nothing, no airway, no nothing. It was just complete whiteout. And when Caleb was on the ventilator, he kept, they turn it up, and then they could turn it down for a little bit. We think he's going to get better, and they have to turn it back up. It was just back and forth like a yo-yo all the time. And so on Saturday, I had we went back to the hospital. And the night nurse had said, it was early Saturday morning, and she told us, she said, Caleb tried to come to, last night. He was trying to wake up, and she said, he kept going like this. He couldn't open his eyes, but he kept going like this. And she said, I said, "Do you want to write?" And he shook his head, yeah. And but he was on all this sedation. He shouldn't even been coming to, period, they said. So she said, I let him write, but it looked like bamboo sticks. And she said, that's all I could make out of it. And she said he was getting so frustrated with me all night. So they explained to him why he was in the hospital, things like that. Well, the next morning I go, and he's trying to do the same thing. Well, when he realizes he can't write, he goes like this, like he wanted to text. And he was trying to open one of his eyes. And then he would just kind of just go like that. And I said, "What's wrong?" And you don't remember how to spell? And he shook his head no. And but he couldn't really see anyway. So so then that day we had left for a little bit because I was going to do some stuff that they need to do with him, suction him and stuff like that. And so we left and we came back, and he was kind of the same way, still trying to do all that. So I said, "Let me just talk to you, you just see if I can guess what you're wanting to ask me." So I said, "Do you want to know why you're in here?" And he shook his head yes. I told him again, and just told him some things. I said, "Caleb, if you just will, calm, don't try to jerk your tube out." And I told him things like that. And I said, maybe, you'll be able to start breathing on your own soon. Well, anyway, Sunday come around, and we knew that it was going to be Easter Sunday. We wanted to come to church. This is our grandbaby's first Easter, so we wanted to be here. But that Friday, when they showed me the x-ray and that was a whiteout, they told us, they said, "Your son's going to need," they said, "none of this medicine worked." and they said, your son's going to need a miracle. So I started texting, calling, and got on Facebook, and I was like, please pray for a miracle for Caleb by Sunday. And so I felt like they didn't have much hope at all at that time, and they saw that, and it was just like, you just left there, and so, but I did realize after Friday going in there and doing what God wanted me to do, that night Caleb tried to open he tried to come too. So anyway, on Sunday, we went back over there and seen him before we come home, and I told the nurse how my grandpa used to, when he was on the life support, he kept trying to jerk it out because he could breathe, and he was trying to let him know. And I said, Caleb is adamantly trying to tell me something, but he can't talk or nothing, and he can't write or anything. And I said, I don't know what it is. I said, but he's adamant about something. I said, and I remember saying, Caleb, you think you can breathe on your own? And he was just like that, that's how he acted. And so when we left, she said she started thinking about it, and she said, I turned his sedation down. Then I turned it down more. And she said, because she called me, and she said, where are you? I said, Hickory, we're on our way. And she said, well, I got to tell you something. She said, I started turning his sedation down. And she said, he started coming to more and more. And she said, and all of a sudden, she said, like the doctor come in, he had to pass 5 tests with the tube in his throat. And she said, he passed all 5 of them. They took it out. And when we got there, he was literally setting up, talking, and he could talk to us. He was just sitting there, and I was like, oh my goodness, like literally raised from the dead, up from the grave he arose. And it was Easter morning of all things. And God's sometimes comical. But I thought that was so sweet, though, for him to do, to do that. But and when I would post about Caleb on Facebook, I always put standing on the promises of God, because God gave me those promises. And that's what I would always put at the bottom, like standing on the promises of God. And our room number there was Ephesians 3, I just told you, was 320. So the whole time, Brother John Burt and Lindsay had been in the hospital some with Denver at this time, and he kept seeing the number 320 on the elevator where he was, and he had put a post on Facebook about it. He said it reminded him of Ephesians 3:20, and it hit me, and I said, that's been our room number the whole time, Ephesians 3:20. Well, that verse years ago, we was going to Camp Zion, and God gave me that verse for one year when we was going out there. That, now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ask or think. And that's exactly what God gave me, that verse for out there. Well, years later, here it come back up again. And I was like, and Lord, you just did that. You worked this miracle. And even though it was hard to go through all this, God worked this miracle. And it wasn't for us. It's for others to see what God does and how God works through, like Pastor Daniel was talking about, you believe for people until they can believe. And through prayer, prayer changes the heart of God. And so all these years, that's what God's had me in, is seeking him for everything. And we went through some hard times, but praying and seeking him has been basically my life. And I thank the Lord for what he's done all these years, and the place he's brought us to here, and to be under the man of God that we've got to be under and serve with the people we have. And I know y'all have heard people say this church is hard to go to, and it is, but it is absolutely awesome. And I thank the Lord for that. And your church, if that's where God's put you, is absolutely awesome for you. And, God does that for each one of us, and I thank him for that. And I do know, too, that our story's not over. God's still writing it. My other son, the other twin, Caleb, actually is home now. He's still staying with us. His lungs are damaged, and they probably will be for years, they said, if they even get better. And so he's with us now, and he's working at a hospital. And our other son, Jacob, had an accident almost 8 weeks ago. So he's been in the hospital for about 8 weeks. Both legs broke, and he has tore his tendons, and all that stuff in his legs is messed up, so he can't walk still, and he's still having to go through therapy and stuff. So if y'all will please pray for him. But God's had him flat on his back, so I know God's working, and God's getting a hold of it, and his promises are coming true is what it is. God's working. But for God to do a miracle in our life, that just, Pastor Daniel and Caleb come on that Sunday morning, they told me Caleb was going to be in a hospital for at least 6 months straight off after he got out of there, because 3 days later, after Caleb was sitting up talking, they put him out into like a therapy room, and in that therapy room, they took another x-ray, and his lungs were fine. Like it was gone. And that because God healed it. When medicine works, it takes forever. You know how that works, but God healed him completely. And then he went to their little therapy. They said it was going to be about 6 months straight off. He was only there 4 days and came home. But in the therapy, he said that the doctors would walk by and say, I can't even believe you're here. I cannot believe you're doing this. Like, we thought you were going to die. And so God did that for a lot of people. I feel like, God showed that prayer works. And I thank the Lord for that. And I thank the Lord for how he works in our lives. And he loves us so much and cares for us that he allows things like this in our life. And the sweetest thing about it is I feel like, the Lord, for him to be able to trust us with stuff like this, that we give him glory and we thank him for it. And I thank the Lord for these things. They're hard to go through. I'm not trying to act like, oh gosh, poor us, poor this, poor that. It's really, truly a blessing, to suffer for the cause of Christ. And it's really not even suffering because God took care of us all throughout every bit of it, So, but God creates needs in our life so he can meet them and show us how much he loves us and cares for us. And I thank him for that. I love y'all, and I thank y'all for your prayers too.
All righty. If everybody would stand up and stretch, we're going to sing glory to his name. Thank the Lord for all he's done for Tracy and Jacob and Caleb and Elizabeth and Chansley and Brian. It's a blessing. You've got to tell your story. You got to tell what the Lord's done for you. All right, Miss Lauren. special singers. I really appreciate you all doing that this year. That's what the Lord had put on my heart, was that you needed to understand and how important you are to Him, how precious you are to Him. Each one of you. The ground is level at the foot of the cross. We are equal sisters if we're daughters of the King. As I prayed earlier this year for speakers for this conference, the Lord allowed me to be able to attend Oasis again this year. And the Lord also worked it out for Miss Christy Glenn to be there. And I had heard her testimony at Mount Victory, where Brother Ethan Green had her give her testimony a couple years ago, I think. And I had not heard her since then. And I was begging the Lord, I need confirmation in my heart about some things about this conference. I knew the verse that Sunshine was reading from last night, highly favored, is only mentioned in the Bible in that verse. That's the only time. And I knew I needed to connect that to you, and so that you could understand how important you are as a daughter of the King, and that you are a princess. And I knew a tiara was involved in February. And so I go in there to listen to Miss Chrissy, and somewhere in what she was saying, she said, "You need to straighten up your crown." And I was like, Lord, that was almost an audible voice. And I was like, thank you, Lord, thank you, Lord. And so I was like, Sister Christy, would you pray about coming to speak? I already knew what the Lord was going to tell her, but I just needed her to pray about it and confirm it. And so I didn't hear from her for a little while, and so I was like, I hope she's praying. So I sent her a message, and I was like, Miss Christy, did you pray about this? And she was like, yes, I lost your phone number. I didn't have anything to connect me to you, and so it worked out. So Miss Christy, thank you so much for coming all the way from Crawfordsville, Indiana. Blah. I so appreciate you making that haul here, and I'm just looking forward to what the Lord has for you to give us today.
Okay, ladies, to say that I'm nervous is very much an understatement. Like I said at Oasis, I'm not a speaker. And Miss Shane, I love her so, texted me, or called me actually 2 weeks before Oasis, and said that Miss Amy Edwards was not able to make the conference on Saturday, and would I please pray about speaking. And I told her then, I said, Shane, we've already talked about this. I'm not a speaker. Like, this is literally my biggest fear in my life is being up here. And she said, well, just please pray about it. And I said, well, for whatever reason, the Lord is trying to get me out of my comfort zone. And I better answer that call if that's what he's asked me to do. So this is a really hard thing for me. And I have my hanky because I'm a crybaby, and that's going to happen, I promise you. We went on a mission trip one time, and they nicknamed me Spigot because I literally cried through the entire thing. And then our church graciously gifted us a trip to the Holy Land. And we haven't gone yet, but we're going to. And I already told those that we're going with, I said, y'all, I'm going to cry. I promise you, I will be a weeping, sobbing, soppy mess the entire time we're there. So anyway, that's what this is for, because I'm a crybaby. But I do want to thank y'all so much. I was sitting here yesterday, and more ladies came in, and more ladies came in. And I looked at Abby, I'm like, how many does this place, like how many people will this seat? Because this is packed. And she said, oh, I don't know, not very many. I don't know, like 340. I was like, 300, what in the world? And she goes, no, just pretend like there's only 34 people out here. I was like, okay. And then somebody else said, pretend like they're in their underwear. So 34 of you, pretend like you're in your underwear today. We're good. We're good. And I do want to thank New Beginning for having us. I brought friends with me from church today, and my husband is just, Brother Daniel, is one of his heroes. And he came into our life at a very critical moment in my husband's ministry. And so he considers him one of his heroes of the faith for sure. So thank you for having it. It's truly an honor to be up here. Okay. And then one last thank you. We just had our tent meeting, and we know that so many of y'all were praying for our tent meeting, and I can't even tell you what happened in those 2 weeks. Our church is literally a new church because of it. And without a doubt, it was because of a lot of y'all's prayers on our behalf. And one of our answers to prayer actually came with us on this trip, and it's my dear friend Shelley. I have known her since I was a very little girl. And she came to me at one of our morning boosts that we have every morning with Brother Cody and Brother John and Bert. And she was just a mess. She said, I just don't think I'm saved. And I can't tell you how many core members of our church got saved those 2 weeks of our revival. And so now we have a new church, and we're so excited. And anyway, one of y'all's answers to prayer is actually sitting here in our service today, and I'm just so thankful for that. We are having a conference ourselves, we're going to attempt to have our very first ladies' conference in May. And when Miss Melissa sent me the information about this conference, I looked at the verse, and I was like, oh, this is literally the exact same verse, same passage, exact same verse. And then I just spoke at another ladies' conference a couple of months ago, and their next year's verse is the exact same passage of Scripture. And I said, okay, for whatever reason, the Lord is trying to get this message across to a lot of ladies at the exact same time. So we had a meeting with our ladies at one of our conference meetings, and I broke down at the meeting, and I said, verse 17 has just captured my heart today, and I'm a mess that he thinks of me that often. And I couldn't get past it that day, and I was a mess that day all day long. Couldn't even hardly get through our meeting that he loves me a bazillion times more than this and thinks of me a bazillion times more than this. And so I'm going to keep this in the most special place that I can find. I love that. That's awesome. When I got to praying about what I would be speaking about today, I got to thinking about being highly favored and what does that mean? But what does it mean to me? And she had asked me to share my testimony when she first asked me at Oasis if I would speak, if I'd be willing to speak. She wanted me to share just a brief part of my testimony. And this is what highly favored means to me. I was a deacon's daughter my whole life. We started going to church when I was 5. My mom was already saved. My dad got saved pretty soon after he started going to church. And I was raised in a Christian home. I remember, and I love my parents my life. I love them so much. But at the age of 8, they had called me into the living room and started asking me all the Bible questions. Do you know the story of Jonah? Do you know the story of David? Do you know and I had answers for every single one of them, knew all the answers to all the Bible questions. And I remember them saying, well, tomorrow at church, we're going to go forward and you can get saved. And I said, okay. So that was my first profession, 8 years old, and that's how that happened. But I started having doubts about my salvation when I was about 16 years old. And I remember thinking, I think I just did that because they asked me if I wanted to do that. But I was a deacon's daughter, and how do you go about saying, that you're not saved? But I thought, well, I'm probably saved because they took me forward when I was 8. I can tell you what I wore that day. I wore a little red corduroy jumper dress with gold buttons right here. I knew what I was like, well, I even remember what I wore that day, so I'm pretty sure I'm saved. And And then I remember just several times in my life, all of the doubt that I had, but I wasn't about to ever say that. So I remember sometimes in my bedroom I would think, okay, God, if I'm not saved, let's go ahead and do that now, because I don't have to tell anybody that I wasn't saved. So I'll just do it privately so nobody has to know that I wasn't really saved when I was 8. And so I don't know how many times in my life I did that. I literally would do that several times. Like, okay, if I'm not, let's go ahead and do it now. I'll do it. Nobody will know. But I do know that throughout my lifetime, I saw God work in many ways in my parents' lives, in my sisters' lives, in our church. So I had seen God working. I knew he was real. There was no doubt in my mind that he wasn't real. I had plans to become a hairstylist. That's what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I graduated high school. I was getting ready to go off to beauty college. And my pastor at the time came to me and said, why don't you think about going to Bible college just for 1 year? Let's just go 1 year and just see what God does. And I was like, I want to be a hairstylist. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want to be a pastor's wife. I don't want to go to beauty. I don't want to go to Bible college. I don't want any part of that. I remember in high school there was a girl that sat beside me in science class, and she would write, her name was Darla, and she would write, Darla loves Randy. Randy loves Darla. And I would think, Randy, that's a weird name for a guy. Why would you date somebody named Randy? I remember thinking that in high school. Okay, so then my plans was to be a hairstylist. I was going to live in the city. I was going to have pictures on the wall that didn't mean anything. I was going to have this fancy lifestyle. That's being a hairstylist, right? I was going to have this big fancy lifestyle. So that was my plan, though. That's what I wanted to do. And I know, and one time my mom brought me into the bedroom. She said, honey, you've got to be real careful of your testimony as a teenager. You never know. God might call you to be a pastor's wife or a youth pastor's wife. And I remember on the bed like that, I was like, Mom, I am not going to marry a preacher or a youth pastor. That's not going to happen. No. Okay. So my plan was, and I just know God was saying, silly little girl, you silly little girl. You are going to marry Randy. You are not going to live in the city. You're going to live on a farm. And you are going to be a pastor's wife. You silly little thing. I know that's what he was saying. But I did go off to college, met my husband, Randy, and I remember the first time I saw him walk through that college, y'all, I about fell out of my chair. I kid you not. He walked through that place with his backpack on one shoulder like he owned the college. Like he just had this, yeah. He caught my eye right from day one. Like he was like, oh. And I remember one day I was looking at the bulletin board, and I was a freshman. So he was a senior in college. I was a freshman, just new, had no idea what I was even doing there. And I was looking at the bulletin board like for activities to do for the weekend, and he walked up to me and he said, hey, is your name on that list? And I was like, I don't know. What list? What? And he said, the list of the 10 most beautiful women. I said, okay. This is looking good. So, needless to say, I did not graduate college. We got married that next August. Like, it was a done deal, sealed and deal. But I remember him sitting me down one day, and he said, I am called to preach. Are you going to be able to be a pastor's wife? Can you do this? My very first thought wasn't, about what kind of a life we would be living as a pastor and pastor's wife. My very first thought was, I'm not saved. I knew it. And I thought, God has brought this amazing person into my life. There's no way on earth I was going to tell him I wasn't saved because he wouldn't have married me. I knew it. But I thought, okay, God, I probably need to get saved now because he won't marry me. He will not marry an unsaved girl. I knew it. So let's just do this privately, Lord. So he won't have to know. I don't even know how many times I did that, y'all. I'm not kidding. I don't know how many times I did it. We had 3 children. We were married for 10 years. But let me tell you, for those 10 years, I lived in fear. Because I knew it was not real. What I had done was not real. It was me trying to feel safe, but it wasn't real. And I remember nights I would lay in bed and he wouldn't be there, and I would feel around in the bed and I would be like, oh, the rapture happened. I knew it. I just knew the rapture had probably happened and he had been taken. Or I couldn't find my kids around the house. They'd be outside playing. I couldn't find them. And I would look for their clothes laying on the ground because I thought the rapture's happened and my kids are gone. And one night we were having revival. We were in the middle of a building project at our church. And we were in the middle of that, and we were having a revival. And we were on our way home, and our kids were singing in the back seat, and I had the Christian kid songs playing on the radio, and they were just singing to the top of their lungs. And all of a sudden, you know, when you're driving down the road and you pass a car and you look in your mirror, and the inside of your car will light up as they're passing. Okay, well, I happened to look in my mirror, and my kids were gone. They were singing one minute, and the next minute they weren't. Just like that. And when that car passed, they weren't there. And I literally about drove my vehicle off the road. I was so scared that the van veered off the road. And I was like, Lord. I know this is the last time you're going to talk to my heart. I knew it. I knew he would never speak to my heart again if I didn't surrender it. I looked in the car, and God had put all 3 of my babies sound asleep at the exact same time. And they had even slumped over in the car. That's why I couldn't see their little heads. But I know God did that. I know he did that. Without a doubt, he did that. So that next night, I don't even know why I waited to the next night. I don't even know why I waited, because God clearly had told me that was my last chance to get saved. He was not going to break my heart anymore after that. I knew it. So the next night at revival, I couldn't hardly sit there. My legs were shaking so hard. My heart was about to beat out of my chest. And invitation came, and I literally grabbed my husband by the shirt, by his jacket. Literally the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. Was to tell my husband, my pastor of 10 years, that I wasn't saved. Yanked him down to the altar. And I just kept saying, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He didn't know what I was confessing to. He was like, what? Just say it. Just say it. First of all, I'm thinking, if he thinks I'm having an affair, who has time for that? I've got 3 kids. I'm tired. I didn't know that's what he was thinking. I know, because I bet I said, I'm sorry 100 times. He kept saying, he finally just like grabbed my face. He said, tell me, what are you sorry for? I said, I'm not saved. Can I tell you that I'm so thankful for a husband that never questioned me? He never said, don't you dare embarrass me. He never said, what on earth, you've been saved. He never questioned me. He said, let's get it taken care of right here, right now. There's a little spot on our platform right here in the corner where my husband knelt down with me, led me to the Lord when I was 29 years old. How do I know that I'm highly favored? Because he spared my life. He was patient with me. He was long-suffering. How do I know that I'm highly favored? Because he made me a wife. He made me a mother of 3. And then 16 years after our youngest was born, God blessed us with a beautiful Maya. That's how I know I'm highly favored. He made me a mother-in-law. He gave me my sweet Tyler, who was a party boy, who did all the drugs, who did the drinking, who did heaven only knows what. I don't even know what that boy did before we met him. Without surrendering to what the Lord had called me to do the hard thing, the hardest thing I've ever had to do, he might not have brought our Tyler, our daughter-in-law Kirsten, who's been saved through our ministry, Tyler, who's been saved through the ministry, our daughter-in-law Lexi, who y'all have probably heard a lot of her testimony through Brother Heath. He shares her testimony a lot. Would they have ever come to know the Lord? I don't know. I pray, that anyone who doesn't hear hears eventually, but I can tell you all 3 of our in-law children have been saved through the ministry. I'm now a Meemaw and a Mimi. Being highly favored, ladies, is God gracing you to do the hard things. He calls you to do the hard things. And I'm going to promise you, and I'm going to promise my children, my grandbabies, that they're going to know of the Lord because I'm going to share what he's done in our lives. I will continue to share the miracles. Our home will never not know the miracles because we are intentional in sharing those with our family and with our kids. It's so important to do that. So my job as a wife, as a mama, still raising one in the home, pastor's wife, a mother-in-law. I'm to set the example for my in-law children as well, and to my little grandbabies who call me Meemaw and Mimi. I'm to let them know that they're highly favored. We've got to take up the hard things. We've got to do the hard things. It's so important, but it's also so important to let them know when God is blessed with the miracles as well. So, real quick, I want to take a look into Rahab. I love this story so much. If you have your Bibles, turn to Joshua chapter 2. Lord, ladies, we've all heard the story of Rahab. We know what kind of lifestyle she was living. She was not accepted by the people of her home. And Joshua chapter 2, verse 1 says, "And Joshua the son of Nun sent out to Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, 'Go view the land, even Jericho.' And they went and came to the harlot's house named Rahab and lodged there." So we all know the story. Joshua sent out the 2 spies. They went to Rahab's house. And ladies, this is why it's so important for us to rehearse in the ears of our children the things that God has done, because later on we're going to read that Rahab, the reason she believed was because of what she had heard. And that's why, even though we go through the hard things, that's why when God calls us to do hard things, let me tell you, admitting that I was a unsaved pastor's wife for that long, that was a hard thing. So doing these hard things is so important because he's going to give you the testimony later to help others. Okay, so in verse, hold on, this was the funniest story. So every time I think of Rahab, I think of this. We had a fall gathering, get-together thing at the church one year, and all the little children dressed up as Bible characters. And so they would come on the platform, and my husband would say, "Oh, who are you?" And they would say, "I'm Mary," or "I'm Joseph," or, they all had their little Bible character names. This one old girl came up there, and she looked so cute. She looked adorable. And he said, who are you dressed up as tonight, honey? And she said, "Rahab." And her mom was like, "Yep, that's right. She's little Rahab." And Randy was like, that's a little odd, okay. He didn't say that to her, but in his mind, you could see it all over his face. He was going, okay. So he passed her along. She went down the line. And after church, she had called her mom, and she said what we had been doing at church that night. She goes, "Yeah, well, what did the kids dress up as?" And she goes, "Well, Levi was such and such, and they were such and such, and Addie was Rahab." And her mom said, "You dressed your daughter up as a harlot?" And she said, "What?" She said, "Rahab was a harlot." She goes, "Oh my word!" Like, it didn't even click with her. Well, then she was mortified. She called "Pastor, I am so sorry." He said, "Well, she was redeemed." It's okay. It's okay. She wasn't always a harlot. So, anyway, so every time I hear the story of Rahab, I think of that story. I laugh. Sometimes I will call my friend Callie. I'm like, "Do you remember when you dressed her up as a harlot?" Okay. In verse 2 through 4, it says, "It was told the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, there came men in hither at night of the children of Israel to search out the country. And the king of Jericho said unto Rahab, saying, Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they come to search out the country." Okay, Rahab knew these men were in her home. She had allowed them to come in. She had heard the things that the Lord had done, and she wanted to do something mighty for the Lord. That was in her heart because of what she had heard. She hid these men. Now, she knew if the king found out, she was going to die. So that's a hard thing. She knew the task at hand, but she also knew that she would be killed for it if the king found out. This wasn't something easy for her to do. This was something she had to really think out and know in her heart that God was going to take care of this. If she didn't know that, she wouldn't have done it. If she didn't know that God was going to take care of this situation, she would not have agreed to do this. And it says, "And the woman took the two men and hid them." But the verse that I love so much, down in verse 9 through 11, "And she said unto the men, I know the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you, and when ye come out of Egypt, and what ye did to the two kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, and Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed." And this is what I love. She said, "And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts did melt. Neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is the God in heaven and above and on earth beneath." What if no one had ever told Rahab the things of God? Ladies, do we keep the things that we know and the things that we experience, do we keep those to ourselves? Or are we the ones sharing everything that God has done for us? Are we the ones that like, you can't keep those miracles to you if you tried? Are you the one sharing those? Because if not, someone might not be hearing and developing that faith in them for salvation down the road. I'm going to tell you, had I not been in a family that experienced the things of the Lord and heard all the things, my mom is one that just, blah, 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 blah. She tells everything and all. She can't keep things to herself. Had my mom not shared those things as a child growing up, would my faith have been enough to know that the hardest thing I was going to have to do is walk down that aisle? And I knew once I took that step, everything was going to be okay because the Lord was faithful. I knew that. But had someone not shared those things with me, had someone not shared those things with Rahab, would she have had enough faith to have done this? I don't think so. Ladies, but God, that's something that I love the thought, but God. How many times in our lives things happen, things occur, and things come into our lives and situations, and you can only say, but God. This was happening, but God. He steps in just when we need him. We have our middle son, Clay, is a diabetic. He was diagnosed when he was 2 years old. And that was a tough time. That was a very tough time in our life. But one time we were on vacation, and we had gone down to St. George Island. I don't know if any of y'all have ever been to St. George. It's a 7 mile or 6 or 7 mile long island. And we thought we'd venture out for the day and walk the entire length of the island. We thought that'd be a great idea with 3 children. And that was obviously my husband's idea. I would never have thought that up. I was like, okay. For whatever reason, that day we did not take a snack with us for Clay. We always, he literally lived with a backpack on his back from the time he was 2, and that he was probably 8 years old when this happened. For 6 years, the child never took the backpack off his back. It had snacks, it had insulin, it had his syringes, it had everything in it to sustain his life. So why on earth we ventured out onto this 7 mile walk up and, I don't know why we did that. Anyway, we're walking down the beach. All of a sudden, Randy and I were walking hand in hand, doing our thing. All of a sudden, Cody, our oldest son, says, "Mom!" And I turned around to see Clay lifeless on the beach, eyes rolled back in his head. And we didn't have a thing. We did not have one thing with us to bring him to, he needed sugar. He needed something sweet to get that blood sugar up. Well, we were there. We always vacation after all the kids go to school. So, that beach was empty. Not a soul to be found. No one sitting in lawn chairs, no one walking up and down the beach. It was literally an empty 7 mile long beach. And I was frantic. I thought, what am I going to, we literally picked him up. He was lifeless. He was limp. Eyes rolled back in his head. And I said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So my husband took off running as fast as I've ever seen him run. Took off running down the beach, just screaming for anybody to come out of their houses, to come out. We need help, we need help, we need help. As I'm laying there on the beach with Clay, trying to get him to come to, I feel a tap on my shoulder. Now, y'all, there was nobody in. There was not a soul to be seen anywhere on that beach. And I feel a tap on my shoulder, and this man comes to me, and he says, "Ma'am, can you use these?" And it was a bag full of grapes. And I just, fast as I could, took them and started squeezing those into Clay's mouth and rubbing the grapes all around his gums, trying to get that sugar into him. And all of a sudden, Clay's little eyes started to open up. And I turned around to thank the man, and he was nowhere to be found. Now, no one will ever tell me that was not an angel unaware. No one will ever tell me that. I know I experienced an angel. And my husband came back, and I don't know who he tackled to get it out of their hands. I don't know. He came back with a can of Sprite, and he's like, here. And I was like, he's fine. He's fine. I said, this man, honey, there was a man right here. There was a man right here. He had a bag of grapes, and he was right here. I don't know where he went. I don't know. And we both just sat there on that beach and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried because I knew that an angel had come and blessed my son and that God showed himself. Let me tell you, that's a miracle that we share. We told our kids right there on the beach when Clay came to, God just took care of you. God did this. An angel came. We just witnessed an angel. Don't let those things go by in your life without sharing with everyone you know, because you never know how your testimony, how your miracles will build someone else's faith to come to the Lord. They might not experience it for themselves, but they would be able one day to say, I remember this pastor's wife was telling me about their little boy and how they experienced God on the beach. And I remember my mom used to say these things. But that builds people's faith. So don't let those things go and not acknowledge them and give God the credit for what he's done in your life. She believed, Rahab believed, because she heard. It says it in the Bible. It says in the Bible, we have heard how the Lord dried up the water. Somebody went around telling that story, y'all. Somebody told that story. Okay. And this is what I love so much. Okay. In verse 12 through 14, it talks about the covenant, the promise that these spies give to her. The promise is made in verse 12 through 14 that if she does what she promises to do, they're going to promise to do their end of it. They're going to keep their promise. Okay? This part was exciting to me. In verse 15, it says, then she let them down by a cord. Through the window, for her house was upon the town wall, and she dwelt upon the wall. They said as long as this cord was out the window, she's going to be safe. She's going to be safe. As long as she did what she was told to do, as long as she obeyed, she was going to be safe. She let down that cord, ladies. And in verse 18, behold, when we come into the land, when they come back, they said, when we come back, thou shalt bind this line of scarlet thread in the window, which thou did let us down by. So they went down by a scarlet cord. They came back. Once they saw that scarlet cord, that's how they knew that was her house. That was the house that was to be saved. But ladies, is it any coincidence that it was scarlet? No. The beauty of that story is that she obeyed. She had heard. Her faith was built. She had enough faith to do what they had called her to do, what God had called her to do. She obeyed that. And her family, not only her, not just her family was saved. Ladies, if we would take that seriously in our own lives, that God gives us a task. When we're saved, he gives us that task. We cannot allow our past, our shame, our guilt, or our pride. Let me tell you, my pride could have stopped me from making the worst mistake of my life. He'd already told me he wasn't going to talk to me anymore about this. Are we going to allow those things to stop us from doing the great things? Because let me tell you, it's not just us that's affected. Rahab's whole family would have been affected had she not obeyed. She obeyed, and her family was saved. I've got a real quick little story I'm going to tell you. And I'm just, for the sake of their privacy, I'm just going to change their names to Jack and Jill. I know of a young couple who the boy was raised in church his entire life, literally as from a newborn baby, raised up in church his entire life. His grandfather was a pastor, his dad and mom in church their whole lives. And he met up with this cute little cheerleader in high school. He was on the football team. She was a cheerleader. Up to this point, he was very active in church, never missed a Sunday, never missed a teen night on Wednesdays. But she found herself pregnant in high school. And the shame that he experienced through that kept him out of church. He no longer came to church after that. He was so ashamed of himself for what he had allowed to come into his life. They had this beautiful little boy. And he came to our tent meeting out of nowhere. We hadn't seen him in a couple of years. He came to our tent meeting several years ago, and got saved. And then she got saved the very next night. Immediately, let me tell you, this person is the shyest person I've ever known in my life. Even though he grew up, and I've known him my entire life, or his entire life, I never heard him speak. He was so quiet and shy and sweet as he could be, but the shyest person I've ever known. And immediately after his salvation, he came to my husband and said, I feel like God's called me to preach. When he said that, I'm like, I've never even heard him say anything. Wow. Like that's a miracle. I was so proud of him. But at the same time, I'm like, I've never even heard him talk. But he immediately started college and got into Bible college and started growing. And let me tell you, God took that story, what could have been devastating in their life, but they obeyed. They obeyed. And as of 2 weeks ago, he just took on this first pastorate. And let me tell you, they're the sweetest little couple you'll ever meet in your life. But they didn't allow the shame of their past to interfere what they knew God had for them. They obeyed the calling, and now they've just taken their first church. And we couldn't be more proud of them. Could not be more proud of them. They are just the sweetest little couple ever. But let me tell you, ladies, no matter where you are in your life, no matter how you got there, no matter how long you've been there, if you have a past, if you were the cheerleader, if you were the Miss Tracy, if you were the pastor's wife who had the shame of knowing that you weren't saved, but you had to get past that pride and put yourself out there and do what God called you to do, obey and do the hard things, do the task at hand that he's called you to do. If you're saved, you're highly favored. And he will give you the grace to do the things that he's called you to do. He will equip you, just like Miss Tracy said. He will equip you to do the things. He will sustain you. He loves you. He will change you. He'll do the things that we can't do. He does the hard things for us. In all actuality, he's the one that's doing the hard things. It's not us. He equips us to do the hard things. So ladies, he loves you. He wants to do the wonderful, amazing, miraculous things in your life if we allow him to do it. So I'm going to say what I said at Oasis. Pull up those Spanx. Straighten that crown. Hold your head high. One thing we say at our church every Wednesday night at the end, Randy will say, hold your head high. You're a child of God. Ladies, you're a daughter of the King. Don't be ashamed of that. Do the hard things. Do the miraculous. Let him do the miraculous through you. Let him work through you. I love y'all. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Okay, I need my helpers. I'm sorry, ladies. I have these little sweet little girls are going to pass out these to put in your Bibles as a reminder of the hard things God's called you to do. When you see that, you think, Lord, I'll do whatever you need me to do. You've called me to do the hard things. I'm going to do it. He's going to give you the strength to do it. Through his blood, we can do it.
Yes.
Don't ever forget it.
Amen.
All right, love y'all.
Amen. Thank you so much.
love you, sweetheart.
I love you. I love this sweet lady. What a blessing. What a blessing. When I first heard your husband, I was like, really? My husband's name's Randy. We have 3 older children, and when our youngest was 18, we adopted our biological grandchild. And it was like, the coincidence.
go.
Is it a coincidence? No.
No.
It's the Lord. It's the Lord. I was talking to my pastor last night about how the Lord has bonded our hearts with all of you over the years, and what a privilege it is for us to know you and to get to know you. I was talking to Sister Joni last night, and it is our honor to have y'all here. I can't tell you what a blessing you are to us. And those of you that text me and tell me how you're praying, it means more than if you'd give me $100,000 today. I feel like your prayers are the greatest gift you can ever give someone. It is literally priceless. And I'm asking you today if you will start praying for next year's meeting. Satan has fought this meeting. Sister Christy, get ready. He hates you. He hates your story. He doesn't want anybody to hear it. And he will fight from every angle, things you couldn't imagine. Just to give you a little bit of an example, 2 weeks ago, I'm the church treasurer as well. My church credit card was compromised, and so it was hacked. Somebody in Los Angeles and something else, and so they had to shut my credit card down, and it was linked to this event's registration. So I couldn't, then that got shut down, so I couldn't access anything for this, and I started the panic, and then my personal debit card was compromised, and it was like, Satan was just like, I told Pastor Daniel last night, I said, I've never experienced such opposition. And I know where it's coming from. He kept saying that, but you know where it's coming from. It's worth it. He said, did you look in those ladies' faces last night? Yes, it is so worth it. You are so worth it. And just remember, when you leave here, I hope everybody will remember these 2 things. You are the daughter of the King, and how much he thinks about you. Miss Lauren, I did not prepare another song. What do you want to sing? There's a fountain on schedule. All right, let's do There Is a Fountain. You ladies, if you will stand up, and we'll still do door prizes before we go.
Be
I appreciate you being here. If you're in Christy Glenn's, if you were in her shoes, where she was a few years ago, you don't have to leave here lost. If the Lord deals with your heart, there are many women in here that can help lead you to the Lord. So you see one of us afterwards, and we'll pray with you. And if it's not your time, but you know you're lost and you want somebody to pray for you, we'll take your name to the Lord. I think the Lord has given us several themes last night and today. Sister Carolyn, faith over fear. Pastor Daniel reminding us we can go before the Lord on behalf of our family. Ms. Tracy talking about that place of prayer and how important that is for our family, for our children, especially those of us that are mothers. And Sister Christy, what a blessing of understanding, and Sister Sunshine helping us understand how highly favored we are and what that really means. And even though Christy didn't think she was supposed to be a speaker, you are. The Lord has definitely called you to share, and that's such a blessing. I remember when Joni, her theme was My Story for His Glory, and how the Lord just worked in my heart with that theme. And we all have that. If you're saved and you're a child of God, you have a story to share for His glory, not yours, for His glory. And that's what we're here to do. Well, it is time for door prizes. Oh, wait a minute. I've got to tell you something, because I forgot to tell you earlier. The fun fact about Miss Christy that a lot of people don't know. I've got to tell it, Miss Christy. When her boys were in the rodeo, they had a fun day where parents participated in the event. And so she decided to do the steer wrestling, and she wrestled it down in 4.2 seconds, y'all. Yes! Go, Miss Christy! That tickled me to death. All right, Miss Vanna Marna and Miss Vanna Kelly, I need you guys. And Hannah, my pastor's wife, is real busy right now helping the vendors and stuff, so I need you. Yes. All right, get out your tickets. Does everybody have a ticket? Hope you didn't throw it away last night. All right. If you ladies will start sitting on up here, so Hannah can describe it.